Welcome to the Monday edition of Newscope in this holiday-shortened week. Our telephone numbers, as always, are 326-9200, 800-920-9244. Read an interesting book over the weekend and want to share it with you, along with comments from the author, Greg D. Ridgely, who joins us, a Spokane fellow, well, recently from the Spokane area, moved up here from California via Las Vegas before coming to this location. And it is a story about three generations. It's a story about faith. It's a story about war. It's a very interesting conversation, and I think you'll find this compelling. We'll get started with things in just a moment. Right now, let's ask Dave Erickson to give us an update from the newsroom. We are joined now by Greg D. Ridgely, author and artist. We'll explain all of that. Greg, thank you for stopping by.
Mike's pleasure.
Nice to meet you. You and I actually met a few years ago, but didn't know you were doing all of this at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's begin at the end, if we could. You are, of course, the owner of an outfit called Redemptive Ironworks, and some of your work is, of course, shown in the book. I also went on your website to take a look at. You have some pretty incredible ironwork that you do, and it's sort of a lost art in many respects. We had in the city of Spokane years ago Union Ironworks, and we had a couple of other ironworks that did that kind of wrought iron work that you're currently doing, and that seems to have gone by the wayside, with the exception of handrails and things of that nature. You often see the ornamental and decorative iron. What got you into that? Was that your hobby?
Well, I was working in the ironwork trade ever since, junior high school back in the 80s. I was in metal shop, and my metal shop teacher, Mr. Galloway, was the only one that really believed in me as a teacher, so he inspired me to pursue my endeavors in ironworking, and I've just loved it ever since. So I worked in the aircraft trade in California, worked in job shops, worked in weld repair shops, and I was, first time I was in the Army, I was trained as a welder, and that's where I got my formal training for welding, and came back and, like I said, worked in the aircraft industry in California, and then took up the hobby after I got back from Iraq in late 2005, and then late 2006 I picked it up and just started working in my garage building things just as a hobby.
Is there a good market for that?
Well, metalworking, ironwork, etc. has been around for centuries, and you look at the old masterpieces in Europe, just around the United States, beautiful pieces of mastery. Local artisans, many weld shops around the United States, very vibrant business. Gates, railing, fencing. And
you did a cemetery entrance, mm-hmm. which was, I think, the first major piece that you did, was it not?
For the business, yes.
For the business,
yeah.
And but you also made a candelabra for your wife. That was actually the first piece.
That was the first one. It's still hanging up over our tub, as a matter of fact.
Oh, it is.
Has a little place for candles in it, so it's.
So your shop is active doing that all the time now?
Well, yes, we're in business, and the thing with Fort Wright was I wanted to start my business off with a donation to the city of Spokane, which is my adopted hometown that I love so much.
Fort Wright Cemetery entrance.
Yes.
Folks have seen it. It's beautiful. It's a gorgeous piece of work.
I think so.
And most appropriate for the site.
Thank you.
Particularly given your background and the fact that that's a military cemetery and that sort of thing.
I thought it was fitting. So the folks at Fairchild were just splendid in their support of the project.
So he makes wrought iron creations, but also he has written a book called Because He Loved Grandpa. And this is the subtitle is A Grandson's Faith Journey from Pearl Harbor to Iraq. And the book, I read it over the weekend. Interesting story. In fact, I discovered that you were in Iraq about the same time as Joe Dillon, who is a nephew of mine who made many appearances on this program while deployed. Mm-hmm. He would come on the show and talk with us from over there. And that was actually your second time in the military. You had enlisted at a young age, and then you re-enlisted for OCS. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Sure. 9/11 was my Pearl Harbor, and I had the background of my life, just growing up with my grandfather telling me about World War II.
And he was in Pearl Harbor.
He was in Pearl Harbor along with his brother Ralph. And his brother Ralph was on the battleship Arizona, and according to family lore, and was transferred over to the battleship Pennsylvania about a week before the attack happened.
Just before, yeah.
Just before. So they both served the war together on the Pennsylvania. And I just grew up hearing Grandpa talk about the United States, the arsenal of democracy, how great, united, and strong we were. And he just inculcated that heritage into my blood. So 9/11 was my Pearl Harbor, and I just barely made the age cutoff to come back in to go through OCS. So
actually, the Army has to jimmy the numbers a little bit in order to do that. Because you were 38 years old at the time.
I was a couple days shy of my 35th birthday.
So, but they had to. There's a handicapping process they use that sort of waives some of the age so that you could actually do this. Otherwise, you would have been beyond on the calendar.
Yeah, right? The 6 years I did prior service, they knocked that off my chronological
age. So you were 28 years old then,
yeah.
Basically.
I was a 28-year-old, 35-year-old.
Now, were there many of those, Greg?
Well, there in my OCS class in Nevada there were, but we didn't have a huge class. But anecdotally, I heard that was one of the prime sources of re-enlistment at that time in the Army was prior service folks like me that came back in. There wasn't a huge influx like there was after Pearl Harbor.
Your first stint was in the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And you did not get deployed. You were in, as you called it in the book, the peacetime army.
Yeah.
And although there was war looming, obviously we had the Gulf War, first Gulf War, but you did not get sent over in that one. And you didn't like the Army very much then, did you?
Well, I was just not mature enough, I guess, to fully appreciate her institutions. I needed to grow up a little bit, but I didn't dislike the Army, but I just found the regimentation a little bit, trying to get used to.
But by your own admission in high school and such, you weren't terribly interested in academics.
Not really.
At that point. And so
I was a good metal worker.
You did a lot of good metal work and that sort of thing, but I mean, academics wasn't the thing, and rigidity wasn't something that you took to very well.
Not at that time, no.
Organization and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Right. And after high school, now you go to work, first of all, in the metal business, but then you get a shot at becoming a cop.
Oh, well, yeah, we had moved to Las Vegas, and working in various weld repair shops, it wasn't like working in the aircraft industry where you had time to put down a real good product and do really specific type of work, detailed work. So I got disillusioned with it, and I thought I'd switch the agency of the torch to the more manly and cerebral pursuit of law enforcement. Didn't realize I wasn't cut out for it, but I think
that didn't work out. I know. Now, the culture of Las Vegas Police Department, it sounds like a fairly interesting department. I don't know anyone other than from your book who was in that department, knowing you now, but that sounded like some pretty tough neighborhoods you had to work in.
Yeah, no doubt. A lot of times I was more frightened as a Las Vegas policeman than I was in Iraq, believe it or not. And
you found that just wasn't, psychologically, that wasn't working out for you.
Well, I wasn't a man of faith then. I didn't really know myself. I didn't know my limitations, and I think I wasn't honest with myself.
But you saw some things.
Yeah.
And you saw some treatment on the part of, it's sort of a subculture in the police department, as well as with respect to the way individuals were treated, and you got into some issues with respect to reports that you had to make out and all that sort of thing that wound up being challenged, shall we say, if that's the safe word, by folks who had a little more seniority than you and were actually involved in your training in that process. You tried to be straight with it, and they really wanted you to fudge a bit, didn't they?
Well, it seemed like it. That was my interpretation based upon my initial experience. I didn't have much experience on the department, so in the academy they beat you up over report writing and truth and honesty and all that, and then you get out in the street. I'm not saying they were telling me to lie, but it just seemed like you could fudge a couple things if you could.
They wanted the truth stated attractively then, right?
Creative report writing is what it was called.
Yeah. All right, so that stint doesn't work out. You decide to resign before they basically boot you out, right?
Yeah, it was a litany of failure, sure enough. I didn't have much confidence on the department. Things didn't, I had a lot of unfortunate incidents, as it seemed. I just wasn't consistently performing well enough to where I wouldn't make it out of field training. I was extended a few times, and my peers proceeded ahead of schedule as opposed to me, but I just wasn't fit for the job at that point in time.
This process of maturing, while you were maturing at the same time, you were sort of stirring the waters of